Hey there everybody, have you heard about Tahira, Echoes of the Astral Empire? Inspired by tactical role-playing games like Fire Emblem, Tactics Ogre, and Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, Tahira plays more overt homage to the recent trendsetter, the Banner Saga. At first glance, it's like, boy, this just looks like Banner Saga. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? Let's talk about it. There's a lot about Tahira I like. It's a story about refugees. It's a space fantasy story set in regressed futurism. Regressed futurism just oozes cool. We have a seemingly strong central protagonist, a small band of supporting characters, and a straightforward Fury Road plot. Outrun the bad guys. The art is pretty, the music is nice, and as a lover of Middle Eastern history, Tahira draws on a lot of Near Eastern flavors. Incorporation of a Middle Eastern-esque style is honestly one of the 2 or 3 things that makes it more distinct from Banner Saga. It's difficult to escape the other game's shadow when talking about Tahira because there's so many narrative and mechanical similarities. There's the theme of outrunning the evil ones, the relationship between a young woman and a father figure, the use of hit points and guard points and the management of those too, flat chess-style battlefields, a map overview that transitions between the levels and dialogue set pieces, managing willpower as a resource for special abilities, the minimal use of magic, the plight of refugees in migration, and so on and so forth. So what does Tahira do well? Most of the game's positives are concentrated in its supporting cast, the plot, and the combat objectives. I found the Claw, the Hammer, and Baruti entertaining in their banter, and this was probably the highlight of Tahira's writing. It seemed the most genuine, and arguably stole the show and every scene that they're in. I wanted to see the Battle of Outrun and when these 3 characters first met. They interact with that old soldier kind of mentality, reminiscing wistfully about different times. But this is a double-edged sword. Maybe all of Tahira is, because I cared more about Baruti than Tahira. Tahira was mind-numbing, her daddy issues unrelatable. Baruti had character and strength, and I was rooting for him the entire time. But maybe I'm just a sucker for the old loyal guard trope. I also enjoy at some level Tahira's plot. I think there's a lot of problems, but the fact that we saw the side of the Astral Empire, the bad dudes, gave the conflict a human quality. We're not escaping the end of the world, we're outrunning a rival empire who's hellbent on our destruction because we are stopping them from returning to the stars? Or something? You know, there's problems here too, but light magic! And finally, Tahira's combat is mostly based around some kind of objective other than wipe them all out. You usually have to control certain sections of the map, prevent bad dudes from controlling them, and save civilians before being overrun. This connects the story directly to the combat in a more coherent fashion than just murdering sprees. I like this. It did it well. I also thought that the 3 different units, the Knights, the Assassin Mercenaries, and Tank Mercenaries, were both made distinct in combat and in the story. Tahira's ambush mode is the game's mechanical highlight. I was surprised when the game told me I can trigger it whenever, and then proceed to rampage a bunch of archers when an enemy soldier was mid-step. This was awesome, and I loved it. But the combat is bogged down, so here we need to talk about the stuff that Tahira doesn't do well. The bloated combat sequences, the weird tonal shifts in writing, the lack of tactics, and Tahira herself. Combat is too long. There's really only half a dozen levels in the game, but each level is spread over 2 to 3 fights in sequence. It's not overly difficult once you understand some of the game's mechanics, like friendly units block movement paths, you can move, attack, move, turn order is always the same, etc. But boy does it get tedious. I think there's a reason a chessboard only has 32 pieces. We have more than 32 pieces in the majority of Tahira's combat. Almost every fight ended in 5 minutes of sped up combat animation as I hunted the last pack of bad guys so I could trigger level completion. It doesn't need to be so drawn out. It gives the impression some combat is just filler. It could be tighter and more succinct. There's also some weird stuff going on with the writing. Maybe some of you guys and gals never noticed. Maybe this is just me, I don't know. But in the opening 30 minutes, we come across a gang of enemy soldiers at a burnt farmstead. They engage with the main character, Tahira, and there's these weird threats of sexual violence going on. It sticks out like a sore thumb because this is the only time this particular trauma of war is talked about. It seemed really edgy and gritty and dark just for the sake of it, particularly because this is really the only time it occurs. We don't really talk about this narrative element throughout the rest of Tahira's story. Sexual violence is explicitly referred to in the first hour of the game, but later on there's an exchange between the main characters where they're tongue-in-cheek about sexual innuendos. It's kind of weird. There's like a tonal disconnect, and tonal consistency is a key part of narrative design, especially when you kind of come out of the gate talking about really heavy stuff that is forced migration and refugees and outrunning an incredibly brutal military empire. So this tonal stuff stuck with me as a constant weakness of Tahira. The writing surrounding the Astral Empire is also filled with problems, and it constantly flip-flops between sympathetic conscripts, a fascist general, and evil captains. It's too inconsistent to be considered a complex or three-dimensional depiction of war and its combatants. There's also not really enough role-playing elements going on. You don't get to level up characters or customize anything at all, and I wouldn't say that this is a flaw if the game didn't show me that I got a couple of these rank up moments, but I never really knew what these rank up moments for my units were really about. Also, some of your battle squad are named in cutscenes and dialogues, like Abdullah, who's the young Avistan knight, but the game never tells me which one of my knights is Abdullah. Like, why? I liked Abdullah and I wanted to follow him both in the story and in the combat, but all I get are these nameless lumps. Something's missing here. And once you unlock the 3 unit types, that's really the only amount of team complexity you're going to get. You don't get to mix and match unit types. You get a predetermined amount of each. You get to position them, and you'll find that there's an optimal way to position them, and that's about it. The last thing is about Tahira herself. Oh boy, she is such an unlikable protagonist. She's the cliched princess with father issues who returns from a rebellious yet noble departure from home to lead a broken kingdom and grapple with the woes of leadership. Maybe it's the pacing of Tahira that makes her unlikable, but she really felt like more like a window to view the world and the other characters and the plot. I wasn't rooting for Tahira. That honor went to her small side cast. So yeah, I'll know that there's some underlying bias in my review because lastly, Tahira has some technical issues. I'm lucky and privileged to have a 4K monitor that I get to play these fun games on, but Tahira doesn't run on a 4K screen. That's fine. I would be fine if they just upsized the resolution, but that wasn't the case. And maybe I was fiddling in the wrong place and scouring the wrong forums, but I played Tahira with this giant frickin' letterbox that made the actual game size like half of the monitor. So everything was tiny, which made the combat UI absolutely awful, and clicking on those tiles even worse. There must have been half a dozen occasions where I clicked on something that I didn't mean to, but that's only because my cursor's so small and I'm squinting 6 inches from the screen. I managed to get through the game in its 10-hour runtime, but holy frick, it was painful. Some folks will complain about the game's ending. It's abrupt, it's sudden. I almost didn't mind. It ends on a clear cliffhanger, and it's unfortunate that the devs have pretty much said that Tahira's not getting a sequel anytime soon. I personally think that there's some closure to the game, yet the ending could just be another knock against Tahira. I love tactics games. I wanted to love Tahira. You don't see a lot of Middle Eastern flavored tactical role-playing games in a regressed futuristic setting with light magic, but there's too many flaws, both in the narrative, technical, and mechanical departments, for me to recommend this to any of you. Maybe if you're a die-hard tactics fan, you'll give it a shot, but Tahira lives in the long shadows of other tactical role-playing games.